Welcome to the Risk of Insanity podcast. This is Alex.
And this is Shondor.
Where we grow, change in mind, body, and spirit, one episode at a time.
Today we're going to talk about habits, breaking bad habits, and how to create new habits. You mentioned just now that you have a lot of bad habits. Explain one of your bad habits that you want to change.
Oh man, I've been working on a lot of my bad habits, but pressing the snooze button, not just getting out of bed. That one's kind of hard, but man, one of the habits I've been working on for years, actually the main habit, is how I eat. Just with things that trigger me to eat and what I eat.
Definitely, that's something that I've been working on as well. I have not been known with my friends to have been eating healthily. I have kind of a sugar addiction, some might call.
Kind of?
I eat a lot of candies, for those who don't know me. And I've been trying to cut myself down on that. But yeah, it's a bad habit, and we're here to talk about habits and how to break them. So when you think of habits, what comes to mind?
That's a good question. Like, what's the initial thing we think of when we think of habits? Something we do constantly, without thinking. Usually triggered by either a certain place or a certain thing happening to you.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be a good or bad thing that happened to you, they can trigger the start of the action that is the habit.
Of course, and that's something that I've come across a couple times, is that subconsciously, every single little thing that you're sensing,
Mm-hmm.
you take it in, and it creates your environment in the sense of, oh, these are these outside triggers, this is what happens, and you react to them, and you create your habits based on things that...
Well, yeah, it really is like it's your brain literally creating pathways,
Mm-hmm.
inside of it, and it reinforces them, and that reinforcement could be, I don't know, you do something and get a cookie afterwards. That's, it's giving, it's when kids are young, you give them a good reaction when they do something good. It's strengthening those pathways in the brain, and your brain ultimately, at the basic level, it wants the path of least resistance. And so if you keep doing something and that pathway's in the brain, like your brain is more easily gonna follow that than veer off of it.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like that path of least resistance comes from repetition, because it's the easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing ever starts as, per se, the given path.
Yeah.
It's how things form. So what I came across is that there's 4 steps to building a habit. The first stage is kind of the clue, something that kind of triggers you to do something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then there's the craving, what you want to feel afterwards. There's the response to the craving of I want to do this in order to feel the what the craving is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the reward of either positive or negative based on your response, right?
Mm-hmm.
And through this repetitive cycle, let's say, even a very subconscious one, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
You walk into a room, it's dark, right?
Yeah.
That darkness triggers something and says, oh, I want to see. That's your craving, right?
Yeah.
What's your response? You turn on the light switch immediately. That's the response, and the reward is being able to see. It's a habit that you don't think about,
yeah,
but it's trained in you through these 4 steps.
You're right. Anytime you walk in a room and you do something, you're like, wait, why did I just do that? Or like you go to flip off the lights, wait, the lights are already off. But something, it's interesting that, those 4 steps though, because that really, it's interesting on how that seems to correlate with the idea that when we get a reward, it's not so much that we get the dopamine firing from the reward, it's actually like the response that we get it from. So like, say you have a rat in a light goes off and it gets a treat, and it knows that if it presses the button and the light goes on, that it gets a treat. You know, eventually it'll actually start getting the dopamine hit just by pressing the button and the light going on. The dopamine hit doesn't come from the treat; it actually comes from the light going on. And him responding to that and going to get the treat.
And I feel like that's a dangerous correlation that comes from these habits per se, is because you attribute the response to the craving rather than the actual, or sorry, the response to the reward rather than the craving.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say you're smoking, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're wanting to feel good about something, less anxious or something per se, right?
Yeah.
The craving is to feel less anxious, but the response is to smoke. The reward is feeling less anxious, but you're associating smoking with less anxious.
You're right. And I mean, and personally, yeah, that is something I've had to work on, because I've had that. You know, I was a heavy smoker, and in not smoking, it was more the It's interesting. Crap, because like your brother and I talked about this once too, in the idea that it's not so much what you're smoking or whatever, it becomes the action of doing it, you know? And that's why, like, even now, sometimes if I'm stressed out and I want to feel less anxious or something, I'll even take a pen and do the motion. And it's weird that, it's not quite as effective, I guess, anymore. It was when I first tried to stop smoking, but like it still gives me almost a sense of security that in that moment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to say security because I'm not secure. There's nothing, holding me, helping me, but it's that feeling of relief from that stress.
Absolutely, and to go off of that, then in order to break these habits, you need to, I think of this as a loop, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cue leads to the craving leads to the response leads to the reward, and then it starts all over again. If you remove one of these, you can't go to the next step. It breaks the habit.
Yeah.
So in order to stop these four things from happening, right, you need to make the trigger, the cue, invisible. If you don't have that trigger to what starts the whole thing, then you're not going to want to crave that negative or a seemingly positive feeling or reward, but you go through a negative response, right?
And that's a very important thing. I think when trying to break a habit, it's you gotta take one of those steps out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard. Like for smoking, it can be kind of easy or easy-ish, I guess. You can't control other people and seeing them smoke, but in your own environment, you can control your own environment, like your own house, your at least your room. You can go at least your room you can control, right? And so you can put the things for smoking or the things for eating those certain things out of sight. And like, oh my God, anytime my mom buys cookies, I'm like, please don't put them in my line of sight. Don't put chocolate chip cookies out on the counter. It's just not gonna go well for me.
Absolutely, and that brings up another great point, and that point is how your social circle heavily influences your choices and your habits, because as a very popular saying goes, show me your friends and I'll tell you your future. Kind of another similar saying. Kind of a similar saying is you are the average of your 5 closest friends.
I mean,
right?
If you're trying to give up a habit like smoking, everyone around you is smoking, it's going to be pretty difficult.
Exactly.
That's not, that's your environment that you can't, that's unfortunately an environment that you can't control because you can't control others, but...
Actually, there's a study that shows that if a person, this is kind of regarding smoking and just food health in general as well. So if your friend smokes, you're 61% more likely to smoke. And if for eating, if you have a friend that is obese, then your chances of also becoming obese increases by 57%. But to the positive side of this, right, if a close friend is happy, then the probability of you increasing your happiness is also at 20%.
Mm-hmm.
So it really shows how important it is to have the right social circle around you,
Mm-hmm.
because they will influence, as we said, subconsciously, everything is coming at you. It triggers you,
Yeah.
and subconsciously, your closest friends will influence how your habits
Yeah.
evolve.
I think it was really important that point out there though that it's an increase of 67% and or 60-some%, 57%, right?
Yes.
That's not like, you know, oh, it's 57% chance and 43% chance of this. It's like, no, you're actually increasing the likelihood by that much, which is insane. But I think in that point we hit on one of the most important parts of habits. Environment. Your environment basically creates you and your habits. How you set it up, you know, if you can control your environment, it can help you control your habits. And that's, I think, one of the things that you know, a piece of advice I've gotten is like in when you're young, one of the best ways to like grow and change as a person is to not just move out of your house, but move out of your home city and go somewhere else. I mean, you have to be a completely different person. You meet completely different people in a completely different environment where you don't have those habits built into, you know, oh, I go here and then I do this. I go here and then I do this. And that's like, it's almost like a clean slate.
Absolutely.
But you gotta be careful about what you do then. You know?
Absolutely. That clean slate is very, very good. Especially if your social circle isn't positive, right? Your environment. Because, so I heard this analogy is don't succumb to this crab mentality.
Crab? A crab? I mean, like little crabs like go inside, walking sideways on the beach. What's going on?
If you put a whole bunch of crabs into a pot,
Uh-huh.
and one of them tries to climb out, the rest of them will pull it back in.
No way. That's freaking crazy.
So, you want to get out.
Who would want to ever be a crab?
Well, that is true in general. But
pull you back.
But that's important to understand in our lives is you don't want to have that crab mentality in your own life. If you see that, understand that is not good for your personal well-being, your growth personally, habitually, in any sense, and you want to get out of that. Find another social circle.
Yeah.
Sometimes social circles are so toxic that you can't form these proper habits. You can try to start introducing positive habits, but some social circles are just not built to properly function because of underlying jealousy of others' success.
Well, I mean, I think, well, I could see how that's part of it, but I mean, people just, unless they, you know, made the decision and inherently they want to change, why would they, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it, you really, and it, I think this whole, you know, different circle, you know, getting new friends thing, I sometimes it's blown out of proportion, like you're completely dropping people out of your life. But like, you know, it just means spending more time with people who have more of the values and habits that you want and you're trying to establish in your life.
I agree, it's definitely blown out of proportion. But as you
start, like they're not your enemy now, you know?
It's not like you should turn your back on them. But as you start building these positive habits step by step, these values kind of signal, hey, this is what I'm about, and you attract people of like-mindedness.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why habits are so, your social group, high correlation, if going back to the studies of either smoking or overeating per se, is because it's a like-mindedness, right?
Yeah.
And that means when you do positive things, you attract like-mindedness people in that positive sense.
It's our connection with others that I really think we underestimate. You know, how much we influence others, you know, our energy and how much we, or what we do influences others and how others, you know, and if we're influencing others, they're influencing us, right? And especially if we're in a group of people that are acting the same, obviously that's going to influence us, you know. There was something I was going to say on that with crap. I can't remember.
Regarding what specifically?
The influence. The kind of like. I lost it. I lost the train of thought. It was something really good, and then I kept going with what I was saying, and it just totally, train of thought derailed, flipped over, burned, exploded.
Gotcha. Well, if it comes back into your mind,
please
just share it. But yeah, so going on into these habit things is usually immediately you can change it, but after a while, you start having these mental kind of breakdowns, right? You start thinking of yourself, maybe you've done this behavior for so long that, oh, I can have a cheat day, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so far, I'm mentally in a different place than I was before. I can do this now.
Like, and really, when do we start thinking about that? Like a couple days, couple weeks in?
Yeah. You gotta be aware.
You've been doing this for like a hundredth of your life.
You gotta be mindful of what you're feeling. If you start feeling these behaviors of suggestion of going back to your old ways, you have to be aware of this so you can stop yourself.
Yeah, your mind wants to go back to that path of least resistance. But eventually that new path would be that.
If you keep pushing on it.
Yeah.
So I saw that...
Well, I don't really like the pushing, because that inherently means like a lot of effort, a lot of, you're going really hard at it. And I think if you're trying to fight, you're trying to go at yourself like you're fighting yourself, like you're in a battle with yourself, you're gonna lose. Like, you have to work with yourself. You gotta encourage yourself. You're like, now listen, this is good for me. I've been doing good things. It feels good. I'm gonna keep doing. I have doubts. When things don't go the way you think they're gonna go, you're gonna have doubts. Don't have 6-pack abs in a fucking week. Like, man, I'm just sore all the time. But like, no, this is good for me.
I think you've got a really good point there, and you mentioned the time frame, and I was seeing that the average time frame of just changing your old mental image, not changing your old mental image, but getting rid of that old mental image of yourself and trying and initially forming the new one. This is not the complete transformation. This is just getting past your old self and beginning working on your new self. Takes about 3 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. I've heard like 14 days, 2 weeks, but yeah, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. But I think that's short. Like, even if you do something for 2-3 weeks every single day.
Well, that's just the beginning. It takes about 2 months-ish to actually form that habit.
I think, yeah, I agree. I don't know if it was in a study that you're citing right now, or is that what you're doing?
So this is just things that I've seen around. It's not a specific study, but just
but life
about the
average,
averages of life experiences and other articles and resources. Yes.
Yeah, and things we've read too on this. It's interesting because like a lot of people think that 2 weeks to 3 weeks is like, oh, I've got this new habit, but it's like, and then they fall off the bandwagon and they're so frustrated. It's like, oh, it's too short of a time. Like that like you said, I think that is that start. Like that's the start of building into your new life, into your new self. As we are constantly changing throughout life. And I think when we're stagnant and we stay the same, that's part of our misery. Like when we're not growing or learning something, that'd be miserable. Doing the exact same, think of it in the form of habits. Exact same thing every single day. No habit changes. 50 years. Not even a whole lifetime, just 50 years of that.
Well, I feel like I'd be worn down. For sure.
Well, for sure, for sure. But that'd almost be insanity. It'd almost go insane. I don't think I'd be able to be emotionally stable if everything was exactly the same all the time.
You need some sort of spontaneity in your life, but you still need to have the general. So these habits, I don't think of them as per se do this. It's not 100% concrete. It's general. Not attempting, but general. Do it to the best of your ability, and that best of your ability is going to keep increasing as you're getting better at this specific habit, right? Because you're not gonna go from eating three Big Macs a day to eating
none.
Eating a garden salad for your lunch and a nice smoothie for your dinner.
Yeah.
That's
just
a
not,
very exaggerated change.
I mean,
it's small
that's
steps.
not to say you
it's
can't
small
do that.
steps.
It's just
it's agonizing.
It's exponentially more difficult, and it is kind of agonizing because I mean your body wants to reject it. It's gotten into a flow, gotten into this system, of the interesting thing is on that it's like, oh well, I'm living, I'm surviving, it's like, okay, you're surviving, but are you thriving? And sometimes the hard part of that is, do we know we're thriving if we've never actually felt what we're actually capable of, or in the sense of thriving?
I feel like part of that though is okay, it might be hard initially, but you need that you need that support, that circle to push you forward. And that's really good to start habits together with your circle, because then it kind of becomes sort of like, not like a competition per se, but like a healthy competition of, let's say, it builds on each other, right? Let's say you want to join a book club, right? You want to read the most amount of books. So what are you going to do? Cut down on social media time to read more books.
Yeah.
To beat the other person in reading the most books.
That's why I want to sell my Xbox, because I don't use it as much as before, but it's just a distraction from the things I truly want to do. And there are triggers that I've noticed that I'll want to go play it. Like, I'll have that urge to go play it, but I'll be like, nah, I don't, I gotta do other things.
What are these triggers?
So, like, weirdly, one of them's, like, my mom being in the living room, and, when I was younger, right after the divorce and everything, I learned, basically playing my Xbox could get her out of the room, and, it was almost like a sense of control. I could exercise that to separate myself. But I've also noticed, just really feeling overwhelmed, that I have a lot of work to do, and it's so ass backwards, because I'll feel overwhelmed and like, okay, I'm just gonna go play some Xbox, or I'm gonna play this game or whatever, and then it's like, wait a sec, I'm overwhelmed and I haven't gotten anything done. And I just wasted 3 hours doing something that accomplished absolutely nothing. Not mentally or anything. Well, maybe mentally, there are things like the studies that have been done with video gamers, that it definitely does help reaction time and your hand-eye coordination and things. But that's not the point. That's not the value I'm trying to work on, But that people thing, or the circle that you brought back up, that reminded me of what I forgot earlier. That the train got re-railed and is rolling just fine now. But that was remember the train of thought derailed. It's now back on track. Okay, I should have just said it like that. That's so much easier. so much more understandable. But that circle and trying to do your habits, or you're building your new self, and the transferring of energy, how we affect other people and they affect us, and I believe that's totally what the lead by example comes into play there, and that is that's another way of saying how we affect other people. It's something I started practicing in my life, where I'm like, okay, if I can do this, I can't change other people, I can change myself, and I started working intently on myself, and then I slowly started seeing the people around me start doing things that it wasn't always the same as what I was doing for me, but they were at least, they saw that I wanted something better for myself, and I was trying to make decisions that I felt were good for me, and then whether the other people in my life had the same values of what was good for them or not, they chose to try to make more decisions that were good for them. Even if it was a different, value. It was still them trying to make a better decision because they're constantly seeing someone else do it.
Of course, I feel like that's definitely you have to focus on what's in your control, and for you that would be changing your personal habits, and if that changes others, that holds true with the whole energy flowing back between people, and the whole your energy attracts those with the same energy. So if you don't have that energy, it'll repel them. But if you can change other people to feel that energy, open themselves to it.
It's also not so much actively trying to change them. Like, and there's been, in life, we, our friends come and go, and, we kind of change circles. And there's people that stay in our lives, and then that we've always considered friends, but, I mean, we didn't always spend all the time with them, Like, take us, for example. We spent a lot of time together as kids, then we kind of had a couple of years separate, and then we started spending a lot of time together again. That's just all I mean by that. But, so just think of going, kind of spending more time with a different group of people, a different circle, or some friends that you have. You don't get rid of the other ones, they're not our enemy. Just trying to spend more time and grow with those people. And it's almost like the other friends that are still connected to you, that you still talk to or hang out with sometimes, they notice those changes. And you just keep being you in doing that, and that's the leading by example. And then they start, if it hits them that, hey, this could be good for me, or they got a good result, maybe I could get a good result, then they start to almost examine their habits too. It's like the observation of others helps the observation of yourself. Like, you see someone else do it, and then you notice, wait a sec, do I do that too? Have you ever had a moment like that where you saw someone do something and be like, shit, I do that, or do I do that?
I feel like I've definitely had those moments. It's essentially that feeling of oh my goodness, I didn't realize that was an option, or oh my goodness, I didn't realize I was doing that. It's kind of, it's opening your eyes, essentially. It's making you more aware of what you're doing, and how that influences certain outcomes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely more about trying to be more mindful about yourself, and more understanding of, why am I doing certain things?
So many of our conversations come back to that mindfulness or self-awareness thing.
Because if you're not mindful, then you are missing out on so many ways to improve yourself, because you're not aware of how to improve yourself. It's literally the state of...
Let's go simpler. If you're not mindful, you're mindless.
So I think that brings us to mindfulness, which is going to be a topic for a separate podcast.
Definitely.
But
a big topic.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll get into that later. Otherwise, we'd spend another 20-some minutes here. But at least. Right, yeah.
Okay, but what are our key takeaways? So I think the most important things for habits.
I think some of the most important. I think the major thing is environment. I feel like that encompasses a whole bunch of things. Such
people, your circle.
Your social circle, the people, also your location is involved in the environment.
Place. Yeah.
So you must have an environment that's supportive, yet also pushes you forward. Not like the crab mentality where they pull you back every time you do something good.
Yeah, or you can look at an environment as completely rearranging your room to give yourself like a fresh start. Just something even that simple. Feng shui. It's a thing.
It is a thing.
Look it up, guys.
To go along with this, I think another important thing is patience. Habits don't get created overnight. You need the patience in order for them to come to fruition.
We didn't become who we are, and didn't get our habits that we have now overnight.
Man, I did. I'm just kidding.
And then also mindset. It's not that we need to do these things. It's that we want to.
Yes, you need to want to be able to change your habits, create a habit, or stop a habit. Otherwise, you're always going to tell your mind, oh, it's fine.
You need to want something different, and if you want something different, you have to do something different.
Of course.
You can't do the same things over and over again and expect a different result. That's the definition of insanity.
Hey, high risk, high risk.
Oh my god. Okay, so I think that's the end of episode 1. Thanks for joining us for Risk of Insanity podcast, and catch you guys next time.